Could Diddy get bail? May sound like a long shot, but is there something that could maybe change the judge's mind? Well, we're going to be speaking with the bail bondsman to the stars, Ira Judelson, about whether Diddy may get out in a rumored new bail package. He has been working with Diddy's team. Plus, what can we expect about whether the rap mogul will spend the next decade or two behind bars?
You could hear a pin drop. No one dared to breathe. The air felt heavy, like the room itself was holding its breath. All eyes were locked on one man, Diddy. He sat still, surrounded by his legal team. But his body betrayed him. Just the slightest shake in his hands told the story. This moment wasn't just serious, it was life-changing.
Big question we're getting in the Sean Combs post-verdict world is, what's next? Right? After being convicted of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution and acquitted of racketeering conspiracy and 2 counts of sex trafficking, now we ask, what is his sentence going to be on those 2 charges, the Mann Act charges? And there's also another question that we're going to address today. Could he get bail? Could he get out? You might be saying, Jesse, wait a second. He was denied bail at every turn. And you would be right, he was. Despite proposing extensive bail conditions during the course of this legal saga, including a $50 million bail package and monitoring by private security personnel, the court was not convinced. Now, by law, the defense has the burden to prove that Combs is not a flight risk or danger to the community. And given the charges, the allegations, including that he was improperly trying to contact people in the case pre-trial, he was always denied release. But then there's what happened after the verdict last week. And this is an interesting conversation. And again, we're going to be speaking with Ira Judelson in a minute, who's been working with Diddy's team on possibly getting him released. But after the verdict, the defense applied for Combs to be released from detention pending sentencing. But that request was again denied by Judge Arun Subramanian. The defense argued, look, he's no longer charged with RICO, there's no longer presumption of detention, we have his passport, there's no access to private planes, there's no criminal history, this is his first conviction, he would be a fool to mess any of this up because he was just given his life back by the jury, he wasn't convicted of the highest charges, he was facing up to life in prison, now he's not. He should be allowed to return to his property, his mansion in Florida, there'll be a $1 million bond. Now the government argued, look, Sean Combs, he was convicted of serious charges, Mann Act violations. There was physical abuse in this case. There was prolific use and distribution of drugs. He committed crimes while under investigation, including having drugs in his hotel room when he planned to surrender to federal authorities back in September of 2024. And Judge Arun Subramanian denied the bail application, sided with the government, that these convictions on these charges, by law, they trigger the mandatory detention statute, that the defense conceded Combs is violent. They conceded that at trial, quote, we own the domestic violence. That's what the defense had said. The judge also made the point that it was impossible for the defense to demonstrate that he poses no danger, particularly given his violence after the searches of his properties and when he knew he was under investigation. That's the whole Violent Jane episode, attacking Jane, one of the victims in this case. And also that the evidence at trial showed there was a years-long pattern of abuse and violence. But despite the judge denying Combs' release once again, and given that his sentencing has officially been confirmed for October 3rd,
his eyes kept shifting from the judge to the jury to the doors he might never walk through again. This was it. After months of headlines, courtroom battles, and watching his public image unravel piece by piece, everything hinged on one final plea: bail. It was his last flicker of freedom, but the judge didn't budge. Without emotion, the words landed like a hammer. Given the gravity of the charges and the risk of flight, bail is denied. In that instant, the weight of it all came crashing down. The room went still. Diddy didn't flinch at first. He looked frozen in place. Not proud, not angry, just stunned. His lawyers leaned in, whispering frantically, but he wasn't hearing them. His chest began to rise and fall harder. His eyes shimmered. You could almost see it happening, the realization that the life he knew was gone. The doors weren't opening. They were closing.
So I want to get more into this with Combs. There was a very unique bail package. And you didn't tell me if it was unique. $50 million, right?
Yes.
You know, the idea of private security. It was an interesting argument because who would monitor him. It was interesting because the prosecution at one point had said it's not fair, right? He's a wealthy celebrity who's providing a bail package that other people in his similar position wouldn't be able to provide. Now, the defense was like, well, the only reason we're presenting a package like this is because of what he's accused of and his wealth and his resources. We have to address that in a certain way. The reason it's so extensive is because of his wealth and resources. That bail package that was put forward was rejected by the court. What did you make of that?
Well, at that time, the judge was looking at the RICO Act and sex trafficking. So, Puffy was looking at possibly 25 years, or more, depending on what the guidelines were based on if he was convicted. So at 55 years old, at that time, it's almost a life sentence. So, and he has a lot of wealth and he had a private plane. So the judge was looking at that. Plus, in the federal system, they look at danger to the community. Where in the state system, they're not allowed to look at that. They look at risk of flight. So I think with all the letters behind that were coming in that we were not really privy to from a lot of the alleged victims, I think the judge made a decision that, hey, this is not going to be sufficient enough. I thought that at the end, he kind of, when we brought in our private security team and we showed him who was going to be doing it, and we did Sam Bankman-Fried. So we knew that, we would be completely covered on that end. And we gave him the idea of there would be no Wi-Fi in the building that we were looking at, and that he would not be able to connect with anybody but his legal team and his family. We thought at that point that maybe we had a chance, but at the end, the judge denied it, and that's where we stood. And now on this case coming forward, after the convictions, after he wasn't convicted, at the end, we didn't know what he was going to do. So, when Mark reached out to me afterwards, we started thinking about putting another bail package together.
And what is that bail package and by the way, is this a bail package that you think could be submitted again even after the judge just denied bail?
Well, the judge denied bail based on the statute, and the statute stated a certain amount of information that part of the Mann Act that, was not eligible for bail. There are certain circumstances that can be done. We're going to regroup again. I know that they were going to go talk to Mr. Combs again and see what happens there. They have the October 3rd date. And I don't know where he stood. As of the other day, he wanted to get out. I don't think anybody wants to be at MDC where he is. So, we're going to reconvene and see what happens, at a later date. We could go back with another package.
Would it require him to stay in New York? Would it be him to be, I know he wanted to go back to his property.
The verdict hit like a thunderclap, and with the judge's ruling, any dream of walking free before sentencing was crushed. No penthouse arrest, no private security, and ankle monitor in a luxury estate. That door had slammed shut. The only thing waiting now was a steel door and a concrete slab. Outside the courthouse, chaos erupted. Reporters jostled for position, barking questions no one could answer. Cameras flashed non-stop. Crowds swelled, some furious, others defiant. Chants filled the air. Arguments broke out. What started as a trial had morphed into something bigger, a public reckoning. Back inside, Diddy sat motionless, his head bowed. The room around him buzzed with activity, but he looked lost. The superstar, the mogul, the man who once owned stages and boardrooms alike, he was gone. In his place sat someone hollowed out by consequence. No legal team, no fame, no fortune could shield him now. He wasn't Diddy in that moment. He was just another inmate waiting for his number to be called.
And there's also an interesting question, I think, that his defense put forward. He just got his life back. That's what they said. He wasn't convicted of the top charges. He was convicted of transportation to engage in prostitution, but he would be a fool to try to violate any of those conditions when potentially he may get a rather lenient sentence compared to what he was facing. So 2 questions there. Do you think that it would require him to be in New York as opposed to Florida? And do you think that you think he'd really be in a position to violate the conditions?
First question is, I can't determine what a judge is thinking. I don't think, and this is my opinion, that the judge would let him out of the jurisdiction. I don't know. We can do private security down in Miami. We could also do private security in California, as we did with Sam Bankman-Fried. I would probably think that if the judge would think about possibly a package, that he would want us to keep him here. When we first put the first package together, going a few months back, we did have an apartment here in the city that I did scout out and located a brownstone in New York that was sufficient enough, which we thought, which was one entrance in, one entrance out, for our security to be there, and no rooftop, couldn't get out from any of the windows. So we could always go back and see if that's still available. I don't know if it is or not. So I can't determine what a judge is going to think. I don't think he would let that happen if he decided to make bail, but you never know. This judge was very fair to both sides in the trial. And as far as would he want to screw up what he, after being, the convictions not coming through, I think he got to be dumb to do something like that.
Right.
He is going to possibly get his life back. I don't know what's going to happen in the music world. I don't know what's going to happen in his regular life, but he's not facing the time that he was facing before that.
And I'm going to talk about sentencing a little bit later on. The private security, right, that would monitor
Yes.
him 24/7. The argument could be, and this is something the prosecution's put forward, how can we trust that he's not just they're not bought and paid for, they're not really gonna watch him if he's hiring them, there's a conflict of interest there. What's your response to that?
My team is ex-law enforcement, all gentlemen that have been involved either in the Marshal Service, FBI, police, even some CIA. So again, my people would not risk their lives on something or risk their reputation or even possibly a criminal charge on something like this. So my guys are vetted. They've been doing this a very long time. So they wouldn't jeopardize anything like that. Now, when we first talked about private security, Puffy wanted some of his people. We denied that right away. It's our guys. It's my reputation on the line here. And that's when I went to court and Tony Rico and Mark Agnifilo both stood up and said, hey, Mr. Judelson is, his reputation's on the line here. He's been doing this a long time. I've bailed out Harvey Weinstein, Conor McGregor, Plaxico Burress, Cat Williams, Lawrence Taylor. So, I'm not going to put my reputation or my license in jeopardy, for X amount of money. To me, I'm going on. I might want to turn this business over to my son one day.
Yeah, the New York Times did a profile on you called Bailing Out the Stars. How are celebrities different? How are they different from other criminal defendants?
More demanding. When you get the phone call from the lawyer or whoever, a publicist, anybody, it could happen in the middle of the night. A celebrity does not want to spend an extra minute incarcerated. Things change so drastically with, when I did Conor McGregor, he surrendered. He wanted out right away. Plaxico Burress, when that happened, we were talking and Mayor Bloomberg was involved allegedly in the situation, and Plaxico's bail went from X to X to X. And then I'm on the phone with his agent saying, hey, I need you to send me a copy of his deed for his place in New Jersey. And
Prosecutor didn't celebrate, just gave a quiet nod. They knew this wasn't the finish line, but it was a turning point. For the survivors who took the stand, for those who had waited years in silence, for every voice once ignored, this moment spoke volumes. No bail. That meant the system was finally taking them seriously. This wasn't just drama for headlines. The evidence was undeniable, strong enough to keep one of the most powerful names in entertainment behind bars, even before sentencing. The judge didn't hesitate. Remanded immediately. 2 bailiffs approached. Diddy didn't argue. He just rose slowly, like every step carried the weight of the trial. Head low, hands behind his back. And then came that unmistakable sound, the cuffs clicking shut. The room watched in silence. Some people looked stunned. Others nodded, quietly satisfied. A few even wiped away tears. Whether it was sorrow for justice long overdue, or grief for a fallen icon, it was hard to say. The heavy courtroom door closed behind him, and the echo seemed to hang in the air. Far from the cameras in a plain holding cell deep inside the courthouse, Diddy sat alone. No designer clothes, no entourage, no empire, just a man stripped of everything but the consequences. And that's when it hit him. Not the kind of dramatic breakdown you see splashed across tabloids, but something real, quiet, devastating. Sources said he broke down completely. The kind of collapse that comes when the noise stops and there's nothing left but truth. Meanwhile, the world kept watching. Because this wasn't just another celebrity scandal, it was a seismic shift. Fame, money, status, none of it stopped accountability from catching up. The message was unshakable. No one is untouchable. But his story didn't end at the courthouse steps. Inside that cell, the silence was brutal. The only sounds were the clanking of metal and the distant echo of footsteps. Gone were the parties, the jets, the spotlight. Now, he was just another number in the system. No VIP treatment, no second chances, just cold walls and hard time to think. He sat on a narrow cot, staring at nothing, replaying it all. The trial hadn't just dented his legacy, it shattered it. One by one, people from his past had stepped forward. Former allies, victims, friends turned truth tellers. They spoke of control, of fear, of moments too dark to imagine. And now he had to sit with every word. Outside, his team scrambled. Press statements were drafted. Damage control kicked into high gear. But deep down, everyone knew it was too late. The story had changed. And this time, the ending was being written by those who finally got to speak.
And then with Dominic Strauss-Kahn, obviously, the world basically came to a standstill because he was the IMF, president, and nobody knew if he was on his way going back to Greece to lend him X amount of money, get him out of trouble. Yet we had to find him an apartment in the city. We had to get him private security. I was dealing with his ex-wife now, coming in and giving me what I need to put a $5 million bail together. So, they're a little more demanding, and everybody's looking to me to make that, make it happen. The lawyer could get the bail, but at the end of the day, it's Ira Jellison that's running in, putting everything together, and the pressure. And I work in chaos all day long. That's my life. So, when it comes to chaos, that's my specialty.
You handle it well, though. You handle it quite well, given the chaos.
I have to. If I, as I said before, if I want to, have a nice home, I want my kids to go to college, I want things to happen. You got to do these things, and people rely on you.
Absolutely. And I think there's something to be said here, and it's important that you said it. Your reputation's on the line. So the idea of when we say, nebulous, how can we trust a private security team? I'm happy you clarified that. I want to get really practical here, realistically. Sean Combs is released on bail. Okay, let's say he's released, he's home confinement. What exactly is he allowed to do and not to do? Is he really there's someone's going to be watching him 24/7? They're going to make sure he has no iPad, no iPhone. Can he give directions to people like associates or other people that are involved? I mean, the concern, of course, is that even if he's out and he's around people, he can still shake things up a little bit. He can still get messages out. I guess the question is, what does it realistically look like for him? Does he sit in a room? Does he only confined to certain rooms day in and day out? Is he constantly watched on tape and all of his electronic devices are searched on him constantly? I mean, what does it look like?
Well, again, it's really up to the restrictions of the court.
Sure.
I have people out right now that are on ankle bracelets. And, they can't go, 400 feet. They can go 800 feet. They can go, wherever, depending on what the restrictions are. In Puffy's case, the way we were putting it to the judge and to the Southern District was we were going to have a call log. So you could see who his calls were going to. We were going to try to take away his Wi-Fi in the building, which would have been a lot easy. We would have limited the people that would come see him. So at the end of the day, we had cameras inside the apartment that we were going to do, which our people were going to put up. And we were going to all let the government be able to get into that system to see who was coming in and out. Of course, there's privacy. So, we were going to make it very, very tight. Now, when you're incarcerated, and I have a lot of friends that I know that that are incarcerated. When people come to see you, if you want to pass a message, messages can get passed. We know that. So if he really wanted to do something incarcerated, he might be able to. If he really wanted to do something when he was out, he might be able to. I don't think that he would take a chance on something like that to risk what he's gone through over the last year. Again, opinion on my end, based on being 30 years in the industry.
No PR firm in the world could fix what had been laid bare under oath. The truth was out, and it was ugly. While the court had made its decision, the public had already made theirs, and it was final. Alone in his jail cell, Diddy began to unravel. Guards noticed a change. He barely ate. He paced endlessly. Conversations with his attorneys turned sharp and volatile. The man who once walked into rooms with swagger and certainty now couldn't trust the people closest to him. Everyone was a threat in his eyes: guards, inmates, even his own legal team. Outside those walls, the fallout kept growing. New victims came forward. Prosecutors filed motions for more charges. Reporters dug up old interviews. Leaked recordings surfaced. Headlines exploded with fresh accusations. Social media burned with outrage. Every revelation opened another door, and behind each one was more darkness. Diddy could only sit and wait. Wait for the sentence. Wait for the next shoe to drop. Wait to fully face a future that no longer belonged to him. His name was pulled from awards he once proudly held. Corporations erased him from campaigns and catalogs. Former business partners issued statements and quietly severed ties. And then came the letters. Thousands poured in, some angry, some heartbroken, a few disturbingly loyal. He read them all. None brought peace. Because deep down, he knew this wasn't just the end of his career. This was the collapse of everything he had ever been. He begged his lawyers, file appeals, find loopholes, do something. But there was nothing left to fight with. The evidence wasn't just damaging, it was rock solid. The story was no longer his to control. Then came the second court appearance. It was a last-ditch hope. One final swing to reclaim even a sliver of freedom. Maybe a new argument. Maybe a technicality. Maybe mercy. His attorneys gave it everything they had. But the judge didn't flinch. Mr. Combs, you remain a flight risk and a threat to witnesses. Bail is denied. Another gasp swept the courtroom. Diddy slumped forward, head in his hands. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He just sank. There was no dramatic outburst, only the stillness of a man who finally realized this is how it ends. The silence in the room wasn't reverence. It was reckoning. The man who once owned skyscrapers was now facing cement walls. The one who threw million-dollar parties was now counting minutes between food trays. The man with global influence now couldn't get a phone call without permission. The judge's words echoed far beyond that courtroom. In boardrooms, in studios, on red carpets, people backed away. Quietly, quickly. No one wanted to be tied to what came next. Because this wasn't just about Diddy. This was a warning shot to power itself. Unchecked fame had finally hit a wall. And this time, there was no exit strategy. No bail. No spin. No escape. Just time.